Okay, welcome everyone. This is your second training, 2 out of 4. So when you're done today, you're halfway there. Very good. I've been very impressed with the enthusiasm and your demonstration of commitment, and I appreciate you being here today. I know this day was absolutely beautiful, and I bet not one of you woke up this morning and said, "This weather's so awesome, I can't wait to sit in a meeting for 2 hours," right? I would rather move my desk out into the parking lot and work out there if I could, but I don't really think that there's enough room for all of us to do that. So I want to welcome you here. We have 2 really heavy presentations today that a lot of you have expressed some questions about in the past. So I took those questionnaires that we handed out where we asked you to sound off and let us know what it is you wanted to know more about, and we developed these 2 training sessions based off of your feedback. So thank you for bringing that to our attention so that we could answer your questions. We're going to have the same agenda that we had last time, and I think each of you got a copy of that agenda when you came in. You also, I know you received a copy of the PowerPoint for the first presentation, and unfortunately, for the second one, our first presenter hasn't come in yet, so we may swap the segments. If he's not here by 9:30, we'll go ahead and do session 2 first, and then we'll do session 1 when he can get here with the handouts for you. Got 2 people trying to sneak in the locked door. So, for those of you who aren't aware, the restrooms are just outside the door to the left. I think we all found them last time on our own pretty well. Please keep in mind we cannot have any food or drinks here in this room except for bottled water. I know you're balancing a lot of papers on your lap right now. One of those is a half sheet that says a question that I forgot to ask, or I don't know, there's some little catchy, there's 4 different topics on there. That is designed for you at your seat, that if you have questions, we're going to do the question section at the end of each presentation, and we're asking for the purpose of the microphones and for the purpose of recording this for other people who will be watching it. Please move out to one of the 2 microphones so that you can be acknowledged and your question can be heard by everyone in the room, so we can answer those questions efficiently for you. But if you're one of those that's a little camera and microphone shy, and you're sitting there thinking, oh, nobody else is going to ask this, well, first of all, I can guarantee you probably everybody else in the room wants to know that question answered too. So please write your question on there, and at the end of the day, when you turn in your evaluation forms, you can turn those in with it. And we will look over those, and if you want it addressed directly to you, make sure you put your name on the form. Otherwise, if I get the same question several times, we're probably just going to go to the expert that we have, and we're going to videotape a session where they address that question with a little more detail. And we're going to add that to our webpage, which, by the way, is brand new, and we're very excited, and all the trainings will be added to that probably by the end of this week. By the end of next week. And I will email that information to you. Now, I've been emailing things out, and I only have about 3 of you that respond to me that you received it. How many of you are receiving my emails? Okay. You're going to want to make sure your email addresses are on something you turn in to us today. I had all of them. I don't know why they're not going through. Of course, my mail was down all day yesterday, so. But that's the best way for me to communicate little reminders to you and upcoming events, things of that sort. And we're moving along pretty quickly. So I want to make sure that none of you are left behind, that we can all help each other through this journey. We have several more people still signing in. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to catch up. So what you should have in front of you is your agenda. You should have the 1 PowerPoint, a half sheet for your questions. And those of you who are administrators, there is 1 packet with your facility name on it. There's 1 packet per facility, and Karen's handing those out back there. So if you didn't get that, we're not going to get to that section until after the break. So you have time to collect those later. During the break, we're going to do like last time, and I have the clipboards up here with all the vacancy list. So if you could come up and update your vacancy, I'll make sure it gets put into the computer and it's posted on Friday. And then I also have all of your certificates for those that attended the last session. Your certificates are up here, and they're divided alphabetically. So during break, update your vacancies, pick up your certificate, and any other questions, you can address them to Karen or Tony or myself, and you've all met them. Just in case, Karen, give a wave. See, Karen's so busy she didn't even hear me. Okay, Tony, wave for both of you. Tony is our housing hero. He's the housing evaluator regulator officer. We kind of gave him that name. So, you know, when you're the only male with female staff, you kind of have to feel like you stand out. So we thought we'd call him hero. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started by introducing one of our deputy directors, who is going to come up and do the administration address with you. And last time Bill came up, our director, and he spoke with you, and I had a lot of really good feedback from you that you enjoyed that piece. We want to keep demonstrating to you how transparent we are, how committed we are to quality housing, and how committed we are to assisting you in providing that housing. So, of course, our administration wants to be part of that, to let you know that this is coming from the top all the way down. Everybody involved in this whole housing program is working together as a team, and I really value that relationship that we're developing, and I think it's really paying off great. So I'm going to introduce one of our deputy directors. This is Dr. Brad Cloud.
It's always great to start the day off with applause. I hope it ends that way, too. Well, good morning. Thank you. I was sort of expecting to see a whole bunch of folks out in the audience this morning, and that's exactly what I'm seeing. And it's just really heartwarming and really fulfilling to see that so many of you have decided to be part of this effort for us to make sure that we have not just housing for people with behavioral health conditions in Kern County, but we actually have really good homes for people. So it's really nice to see you all here and part of that. There's not enough of us here. We need to get more people here too. I know we'll be sharing the word, and we hope you do as well. But it's great to see all of you here today. I know our director, Bill Walker, was here last month to talk about a few things about the department's perspective on housing and our efforts in that area, and I just kind of wanted to add to that and extend to that a little bit today. At a statewide level, our director belongs to an association that other directors belong to. It's the Behavioral Health Directors Association of California. 58 counties in one city. Somehow Berkeley gets to count as its own county, so they're there as well. 59 directors are participants in that, and every year they decide to do some strategic planning. What are the major things that we want to work on this year? And so this year's goals consisted of 4 things. So this is what the head of the mental health, the substance use service departments of every county said last year. 4 things. 1, we have some really important reform happening in the children's mental health system. So we all need to work on that. 2, most of the people that we work with have not just one condition, mental health or substance use. They actually have both conditions. And we need to make sure that we are really knowledgeable and effective in serving people who have both of those problems. 3, they also decided this year, we're not so sure that we have all the crisis and hospital beds that we have, that we need in California to really be able to take care of the people that we serve. And can you guess what the 4th one was? It's housing. Yeah, that's the top 4, and not in any particular order. But housing is one of the top 4 issues for mental health and substance use disorder directors across the state. And I really think that's why we are all here today. We're here because we need each other. That's why we're all here. We all need each other. There is no health, no physical health without mental health. And there's no mental health without physical health. Those things are intertwined and necessary to each other. And you cannot have health if you don't have a home. And you want a home that you love, you want a home that is your place to be, and I think that's what you are all about, is providing that to our residents. But of course, you need them to be healthy as well, and we are that health partner with you, and that's really why it's been important to us to put together this effort to sort of have standards, to raise standards so that we don't just have housing, but that we have excellent homes for people to live in. That's how people grow and thrive and heal and become contributing people to our world. Another late arriver. So we're spending time and effort. I think you've met Sandy, obviously, and Tony and Karen. We've actually created a whole housing administration that they're in that has an administrator, Steve. And we're actually about to add a couple of more folks to our housing division as well, just to make things smarter, simpler, easier. I think what we hope is that at the end of this process, a couple of things will happen. Number one, we hope that we learn a lot from it and that we're actually able to identify things that we can improve and make better. I think we hope that that happens. But I think we also hope, it's really important to us that at the end of the 4 trainings you attend, that you walk away and say, I learned something from that each time. I'm glad I did that. Nobody, as Sandy was saying earlier, nobody, wakes up and goes, oh boy, I get to go to a meeting today. But sometimes when you leave, you think, I'm really glad that I went to that meeting today. And that's what we're really striving for. So your participation and your feedback about what we're doing here is really important as well. We want to be great partners. We want everybody in this room to win, together. And so your role is to do what you've done, to show up, to make suggestions to us about what's helpful to you, to let us know what's not been so helpful, how things can be easier, better, because that's really what we're trying to create here. We think that when that happens, Bakersfield is known for, a lot of things. A lot of things I think that we're not proud of. We have a lot of problems in this community. A lot of problems with poverty and education and violence and drug use and the breakdown of the family and homelessness. We have a lot of trouble with that as well. And the way communities fix things like that is not by waiting for somebody else to do it. It's by everybody rolling up their sleeves and doing their part, and not only helping themselves, but helping others. So we all want to be part of that with you all, and we are so glad that you are here with your sleeves rolled up, shovel in your hands today, ready to shovel some more knowledge and information into your mind. So I just wanted to once again thank you very much. Thank you very much for being a part of all of this. And we look forward to making this a really successful partnership.
Mr. Roy hasn't arrived yet, I take it? Okay. Why don't we have a couple more people trying to get in. So why don't we just take a minute? I think what I'm going to do, if it's okay with you, we're going to flip-flop the sessions. On your evaluation form, we left one is shaded blue and one is shaded green, and we left the lines empty so you can write in the name of the presenter and the topic, and you will be evaluating each presenter individually. So one is blue, one is green. As long as you write down the name of the section, the topic, we'll know which one you're referring to. So let me fast forward through the first presentation quickly, and then we'll jump right into the second one. Just bear with me for a minute. Are you reading? Because we're going to go through this really quick. My thumb. Okay, we're not taking a break. We're pretending we took a break. Okay. We're going to move on to the second section, and that section is the landlord rights and responsibilities on your agenda, is what it says. So I'm going to introduce a gentleman to you, and he's actually got a lot of experience, and I've got a lot to learn from him, so I'm really excited about this opportunity to be able to work closely with the Patient Rights Office. So I'm going to introduce Mark Kimmel. He's a patient rights advocate, and he's going to start the session, and then he'll share with you what the plan is. Again, if you have questions, we're going to address those at the end of the session. And we're asked that you just step out to the microphone. I don't want anybody to be afraid of the camera. It's right there. And if I can stand in front of it, we all can. Turn around and wave. Wave to the camera. See, it's no big deal. All right. We just stepped out of our comfort zone, and we all survived. So good job. So I would like to introduce Mark Kimmel. Come on up, sir. And we'll get going with his presentation.
Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Again, my name is Mark Kimmel. I'm with the Office of Patient Rights. Our office has actually grown over the years to also have the family advocate, and they're in our office housed with both the patient rights advocates and the family advocate now. A big part of what the Patient Rights Office does is a lot of our time is spent in the inpatient hospitals. So a lot of times we see your folks in that setting and are aiding them, advocating for them, and then also helping the team there get them back to you or to your facilities so they can continue in the community and do well. I'll echo what Dr. Cloud said. We need you guys. This is absolutely something that we need to help our clients, and we very much appreciate you guys being here. All right. I'd like to introduce a gentleman by the name of Eric Moss. He's been with the Advocate's Office for a few years now, both as a family advocate and now as a patient rights advocate. He's going to go through the actual slides with you, go over what the rights are, and then again, if we can hold our questions to the end, I'll come back up here and we'll hopefully answer some of those questions you may have. In the slide you'll also see is our phone number, so that if you're not comfortable asking the questions, that's okay. We get a lot of phone calls into our office, both by professionals and clients, and that's fine too. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Eric Moss.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us here at your training. Everybody should have a copy of the PowerPoint that I'm going to be reading to you this morning. So on behalf of Patients' Rights, I want to thank you guys for being here. I know that when I'm working with agencies and facilities, there is a portion of time that our clients are spending in the office with their clinicians and doing group work or different things, but the rest of the time they are in your homes. They usually spend the majority of their days in your facilities, and a large part of their success is a result of the comfort that you provide to them. So on behalf of Patients' Rights, we do thank you for your effort, and we also want to work with you. So with that being said, we're going to start with a few ideas for the presentation today. We're going to be discussing the residents' rights, going over a few of the rental and lease agreement ideas, and then maybe discussing a few of the common problems that we encounter. And we'll give you time for questions and answers to discuss some of your concerns at the end of the presentation. Let me see if I can. All right, it's slow. All right, so the first slide should say, what do patients' rights do? And I'm going to have to turn around because I don't know at what point all of these transitions are finished. Okay, so patients' rights, what do we do? Patients' rights investigates complaints, educate, and advocate for the mentally ill at inpatient acute psychiatric facilities. This is what Mark was discussing. So we will provide services to the folks in the inpatient units, the outpatient clinics, and then at the housing providers where you all are. The next slide, we're going to talk about the different places that we will come in the housing continuum. There are licensed adult residential facilities. There are unlicensed room and board housing facilities. And then there are independent living situations, room rentals, sober living, and Section 8 housing. For the most part, we will do investigations at the adult residential facilities, room and boards, and sober livings. If you are a individual room or Section 8 housing, if we get calls and you're in one of those locations, we will refer to a different authority to look into the situations there, probably the housing authority, most likely. Most of you guys should be fitting in one of these categories or so. Our office will receive phone calls from clients, from family members, from other agencies who have visited your site, and we will respond to whatever they saw when they came out. A lot of times they see something that may look unsanitary, or if they saw a staff interacting with somebody in a certain way, they may not think that it looked right or sounded right. And so they will call our office to kind of look into that. And so if you're in one of these locations, and we may come out and kind of find out what's going on and see if we can resolve the matter. This slide is written, it says your rights regarding clients, but as residents of your housing facilities, the resident never really loses their rights, their constitutional rights. So individuals have all the rights guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States and by the state of California. Individuals do not lose their rights when they enter one of your facilities. Under California law, licensed adult residential facilities must observe, enforce, and implement residents' rights. As a resident of a licensed adult facility, individuals have the following rights that we'll be discussing. Number one, they have the right to services that will enhance their ability to live independently, productively, and with dignity in their community. These services should be provided in a way that least restrict their personal freedom, and residents have the right to have arrangements made to attend community programs that meet their needs that are not often available at your facility. Number two. Sorry, thank you. Oh, I'm not doing my slides at all, am I? That's okay, you did good. Okay. This one, the right to be free from harm, abuse, or neglect. By law, any physical abuse to a resident in an adult residential facility must be reported. This includes all forms of abuse: financial abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse. All of these need to be reported. To report abuse, okay. The reporting telephone numbers should be posted where clients can see them in your facilities easily. If you don't have these numbers, they're provided for you in your slideshow. The next right is the right to receive prompt and necessary first aid and other medical and dental services. This includes transportation to get to those appointments. Okay. The next is the right to privacy, right? They have the right to send and receive mail that is uncensored and unopened, the right to make and receive confidential phone calls, the right to visit with friends, family, and others in privacy. They have the right to visual privacy while bathing and or using the restroom. Okay. Next is the right to be treated with respect by staff. No one, including staff members and residents, has the right to abuse a resident psychologically, either by speaking or yelling in a rude or hostile manner, making threats, intimidating, isolating, instilling fear, punishment by withholding food, clothing, or medication. Number 6, the right to freely communicate and associate with other residents within the facility and in the community. Number 7 is the right to control one's own money and personal property. If a resident wants the adult residential facility staff to safeguard or manage their money, the resident or their authorized representative should agree to that in writing. Number 8 is the right to have an appraisal of needs and services or a treatment plan. Okay. Number 9, the right to practice the religion of one's choice, to attend religious services or activities, and the right to have visits from a spiritual advisor of choice. One also has the right not to practice in religious activity. Freedom of religion includes the right to have a food plan that excludes or includes certain foods or food combinations according to one's religious traditions. Any special dietary needs should be included in the placement agreement. Okay. Next is number 10, the right to be free to come and go without restriction. A resident should follow the general curfew policy of the house rules, but no one has the right to lock a resident into any building, room, or closed area by day or night. The adult residential facility may ask a resident to tell staff if one plans to stay out all night. Number 12 is the right to move out of the adult residential facility. The resident must give a 30-day written notice to the adult residential facility operator before the resident plans to leave. Next slide. All residential care, residential facility, and residential treatment facilities are required to have an admission agreement. All homes are required to have a written admission agreement with all residents. The admission agreement includes a statement of the adult residential facility house rules, basic and operational services, rates, frequency and due date of payment, who will pay, and refund conditions. The resident should fully understand all of this before they sign and receive a copy. Residents' rights should be posted. All facilities are required to post residents' rights, house rules, and phone numbers of the local patient's rights advocate and community care licensing representative. The adult residential facility operator must inform each resident of their rights before the resident signs the document indicating that he or she was informed. The resident should receive a copy of this informed agreement. The adult residential facility must also provide instructions for filing a complaint. Each resident has the right to talk with and obtain services from an advocate. The resident has the right to meet with the advocate privately during reasonable hours without prior notice or permission. Next is for facilities with 6 or more residents, the residents have a right to form a residence council. If a majority of the residents request it, residents have the right to form a resident council. It is made up of residents of the facility and may also include family members of the residents. The council, among other things, make recommendations to the facility administrators to improve the quality of life of daily living in the facility and may negotiate to protect residents' rights with the facility administrators. We'll transition to unlicensed room and board situations. In unlicensed room and board facilities, all California landlord-tenant laws apply to the facility. Leases and rental agreements. Leases state the amount of rent and the rights and duties of the landlord and tenant. Leases are for a fixed period of time, usually a month or longer. At the end of the lease, either the landlord or resident may choose to end the agreement. During the time of the lease, both the landlord and the resident must follow the lease's terms. Rental agreements. A rental agreement is usually a month-to-month agreement. The resident or landlord can terminate this type of agreement by a written 30-day notice. Okay, this is important. It's in bright red. All right. Always have the resident read the lease or rental agreement before it is signed. If the resident needs assistance in understanding what it says, encourage the resident to bring a friend, case manager with them before they sign it. In most room and board facilities, there are house rules and meal policies. Make sure these are clearly stated as part of the rental agreement and that the resident completely understands before they sign the agreement. Okay. The landlord may not evict the resident or raise the rent because a resident, one, makes a written request for repairs to the room or facility, complains to the landlord about the condition of the room, or reports the conditions of the room to the proper authorities. It is illegal for a landlord to lock a resident out of their room or facility, to change the locks on the facility, or take any other action to deprive a resident of access to the facility. It is also illegal for the landlord to confiscate a resident's personal property without first going through the court system and obtaining a court order. Each resident has the right to privacy in their own room, if he or she does not share one. Other than a roommate, the landlord and other residents cannot enter another resident's room. The landlord may only enter a room for the following reasons. One, in case of emergency. Two, to make necessary repairs. To show the room to prospective tenants, buyers, or workers. When the tenant has abandoned the room or with a court order. This slide should say, except in an emergency. The landlord should give the resident reasonable notice in advance before entering and should only enter during business hours. 24 hours is generally considered reasonable notice. For discrimination, the landlord may not evict residents based on race, age, creed, religion, color, sex, sexual orientation, disability, or any other arbitrary basis. Likewise, discrimination against families with children is illegal. Some common problems found in licensed adult residential facility homes. One is there's no residence council, poor food quality, poor treatment by staff, respect and dignity issues, environmental problems. It's too hot, it's too cold. Common problems found in unlicensed room and boards, illegal rental agreements, code violations, poor living conditions, illegal evictions, illegal holding of a resident's property, and residents signing over the payee to the operator. All right. So that concludes my presentation. Here are the phone numbers again. If you suspect anything or you need the phone numbers for yourself, please call these phone numbers, post them in your facilities. And I'm going to turn this back over to Mark for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, comments? Maybe objections? That's always good too. Yes, sir. Why don't you come over to the mic if that's okay?
If you have questions, go ahead and move over to the microphones, and you can go ahead and start lining up there at the microphones, and then they can address those questions.
This would pertain to room and board, not licensed facilities. Where a resident becomes disruptive or aggressive towards other residents, how is that handled in terms of the long-term agreement with the resident? Can they be removed or evicted from the house, and what restrictions are there?
So obviously, in that kind of situation, when it comes to just a room and board situation, you got to follow the tenant landlord laws. If there's such a disturbance, by all means, I would contact law enforcement, because that may be something that needs to be looked at by them, okay? But actually being able to immediately remove them or anything like that, that's not going to be something that you can do to remedy that issue. I would definitely use law enforcement in that type of scenario. And then immediately file whatever you need to do the eviction and make sure that you're doing that properly. Because those type of things do happen. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate that, you bet.
If the client will violate the house rules 3 times and they still refuse to be a big, to give a 30 days notice, who should we call?
Let me make sure I understand that. They're not giving you a 30-day or?
I'm giving them a 30 days notice because they violate the house rules
Okay.
3 times.
Okay,
Because it's in my agreement that if they violate the rules 3 times, they need to give a 30 days notice, and they refuse to move out. Who should we call?
I would definitely look at, obviously, in tenant landlord laws, you need to file an actual eviction. If they're so disturbing that they're causing damage, hurting people, I would contact law enforcement, but it's the courts that are going to enforce your ability to remove them from the facility.
But still, I did call the law enforcement. Unfortunately, the client still refused to move until the police came and kicked my gate door, just to get the client's personal belongings.
Without specifically knowing a lot of the details on that, that's a hard type of thing to answer, because it sounds like there's a lot of details in that question. So again, the best way I can answer that is making sure that you're giving the eviction notice appropriately.
Yes, I
You're
have.
contacting the law enforcement.
Yes, I have.
Get the mental health team involved.
I did
okay?
too.
I think the mental health team coming out and doing the things that they need to do to communicate with that person. And then, again, I think later on, you're going to have individuals that come out to talk with you about how to have crisis services available to deal with the particular crisis that you may be going through with that individual. There may need to be other things looked at. That may be possible. But sometimes situations do get bad. And I'm not sure that I can give you a perfect answer right here, right now, how to handle that, because I do understand sometimes, they're not doing enough, or law enforcement won't quite do something, which is why you need to make sure you're acting appropriately and getting the mental health professionals out there. And then if you need to evict, giving them that eviction notice immediately.
I did too.
Good.
He violated 3 times, in fact, 4 times, 5 times. So I called the case manager to come, and because, in fact, I called the med team, and then I called the case manager the following day.
Right.
And they still, and then they called the law enforcement. And the law enforcement came and asked me the key, but the client had the key and the gate also.
Right.
So what they did is they destroyed my gate And
I'm
the
sorry to
police,
hear that.
because I had the iPads, I had an eye surgery then, and they're forced to go get the key with me, but I don't have the key. My husband had it, and they kicked the gate, they destroyed the door and everything. So I went to Attorney Klimcha, I believe.
Okay.
And he wants me to file something, but I did not because of the fact that I still continue the board and care. But I just wonder, what will I do if I'm on crisis like that? Because I called everybody. I called the med team, I called the case
Right.
manager, I called the law enforcement.
Well, again, I'm very
And they
sorry
still
that type
don't
of
want-
situation happened.
In-
I think the biggest thing for you is obviously work with your mental health team, know the crisis options that you have available to you, and continue to utilize that. And it sounds like you did meet with an attorney. They did give you advice on that. So I think I would definitely follow your attorney's advice in handling that kind of situation.
And let me interject.
You bet.
This was previous to us having a home services department. This is a situation that you would contact us and let us help you with. And we will pull in whoever else needs to be part of that to find a remedy that will work. Maybe
So I should call
You
you.
would call me. If you call that team and you're not getting the results you need, or you feel you're not having your questions answered, then you would call our team and give us a chance to intervene on your behalf.
They're not able to hear you, Sandy, just so you know. They weren't able to hear you on the recording.
Who was it? Oh, sorry. I got a big mouth normally. Okay. What I was saying was, this was previous to us having a housing services team. Now that we are established, we're another resource for you. If you feel like you're not getting the answers that you need, and that you're still dealing with the housing situation, we deal with everything housing. Call us and let us know, and we can pull in the resources necessary to assist you. We can get the individual treatment team engaged, because sometimes when you leave messages for that, the recovery specialist, that individual may not even be at that phone number anymore. They could have switched to a different department, they could be on vacation, and it's just sitting there on an answering machine that no one's checking for a period of time. So if you call and leave a message and you don't get a response, you contact our office and we can intervene on your behalf. Then we can bring in patient rights. We can advise you on the best way to handle the situation you're dealing with. We can come out and do one-on-one mentoring with you and help you develop a policy for how you will handle that same situation in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Sandy. Yes, sir.
In regard of the 24-hour notices that we need to serve the residents, in a situation that we suspect that the residents use or conceal in their rooms drugs, okay. We are trying to keep our homes as a sober living environment, okay. In our agreement, we specify that use of alcohol or drugs on the premises will constitute immediate removal from the property. I'm very familiar with the landlord-tenant laws, and usually the landlord-tenant laws require the landlord to go through the eviction process. Eviction process in a normal situation would be 45 to 60 days today in Kern County. Okay. It fits the situation of an apartment complex or single-family homes. In room and board facilities or care facilities, I think we don't have the support of the law, because the law doesn't address these issues. Okay. Once it puts us in the general tenant law, tenant-landlord laws. Okay. How do you see the enforcement of house rules that we have, that we are able to, or the tenant is permitted us for a room search once we suspect that the resident hold any illegal substance.
First, I'm going to tell you, I think that's the most important part of this is making sure what your agreement says. The agreement you've put together that are the rules or expectations of your facility, and then what you and that tenant has agreed to as part of that. I think even tenant landlord laws refer back to the idea of what's in the actual agreement, what is stipulated as what's acceptable in your home, what's not acceptable in that home. You really got to make sure you have that fine tooth. I think that's why that's an important slide that Eric went over earlier. If it's not in there, you won't have a leg to stand on in order to do an eviction that may not follow the normal 30, 45 days. You are correct, though. The state law, the laws that we have, don't really, they're kind of gray in that area. They don't specify to that, which is why your agreement that you go over with your clients needs to be very clear about what the expectations for that is. If that's not there, that may be a problem, being able to do the things that you think you need to do in order to keep your home drug-free, alcohol-free, or even any other issues that you may be having going on. I think it really depends on how good your agreement is and how well that individual understands that and has agreed to those rules in the house. That's probably the best I can give you at this point, because I can't give you anything that the law is not giving you. You know what I mean? I can't make it up for you. I can't give you anything that the law doesn't give us. I think the other issue I'll let you know is I'm not your counsel either. I would probably definitely look at having counsel to help advise you on how to handle those situations. What today we want to do is just make sure you know what we do know what the law does tell us. And I think that's another reason why we really want to get you back on making sure your agreements that you enter in with these clients are done well. We see a lot of places that are not doing very good contracts or very good agreements. And that's where I think facilities can get themselves in trouble, and we mentioned that in one of the slides, that without that, it's considered an illegal agreement, not a very good agreement, and you get yourself in a kind of a sticky situation with those kind of situations.
We have those items in our agreement.
Good.
But when when you compare the agreement to the law, okay, the law supersedes the agreement. Although the tenant agree to a room search or agree to be removed from the property immediately upon finding illegal substance in the room, the law still requires from us to serve a 24-hour notice before the search.
That's true.
And it still requires from us to serve the 3-day notice, to perform covenant, or the 30-day notice, How do you deal in a facility when you have to protect other people? How do you deal with that?
I don't know that I can answer that perfectly for you, okay? I'm sorry.
Our other presenters should be able to.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to point out. Before, GBLA is going to come in and do a presentation on that exact issue. And I think they'll be able to kind of help guide you guys on how to handle those kind of situations a lot better than what I can. Again, I think that's really more about having your legal counsel, people that know those things can help advise you better than even I can in that kind of area. I do apologize for that, but I think you need to make sure you have your counsel helping you, advise you on each step of that. And I think the next presenter, or the presenter who should have gone first, will help you with that better.
Perfect. Thank you
bet.
much.
Okay, my question is, for the clients that receive Social Security, for instance, they move into our facility or to a facility, and on the agreement, it states that no refunds will be given without a 30-day notice. There's been cases where the mental health worker comes out and they kind of put themselves in a situation where they want to take the client out without a 30-day notice and place them at another facility. Let's say it's already the 15th of the month. So on the agreement, it states no refund's going to be given without the 30-day notice, right?
Okay.
So then the worker comes in and is asking for the remainder of the 15 days because it's Social Security. Per Social Security, they're only to pay where they're physically living. who do we go to so that because we're not kicking them out, they're moving because they want to. Who would we go to so that no refund can be given? And so that they can remain at the facility for the remainder of the month? Just because, I mean, they have been living there, they haven't gave the 30-day notice, so it's not fair to both of the facilities. Who would we go to? Would we just, or what would we do about?
Again, I think the next presenter, who should have actually gone first
Okay.
today, is going to answer a lot of those questions, kind of come up with those scenarios a little bit better for you. You have an agreement. That's part of what stipulates the agreement. Yes, the mental health professional probably wants to make sure that they're moving their client for whatever reason. Again, I don't know what that scenario is, but they're trying to figure out how they get their client someplace and get that person paid and keep everybody happy. And so they're trying to fix the whole situation. But that doesn't necessarily make it right.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to then give up that money or funds to that entity so that they can pay the next facility. I don't think they have that ability to do that. But again, I hope that next presenter does cover that issue better for you guys. And again, like I mentioned to the gentleman here, I think your counsel, if you have some counsel to have advising you on that, probably would be a good idea. Okay, there's nothing wrong with having your own private counsel.
Perfect, thank you.
Hello, I think that standing here, most of my questions were answered.
You bet.
There is just one question I do have, and it's going back with the patient's rights. I think it's awesome that they have the rights, they need the rights, and rights, it needs to be implemented. But when it comes to the actual facility / room and board, there are certain things, okay? For me, it would be if there is things going on with a particular client in a home to where it disrupts the home, my concern is more or less the other clients in the home. I do understand that there is a process to deal with the situation, 30-day notices, police coming out, and all of those things. But I've found myself in prior situation where the resident had made the home so disturbing that it caused the other clients to have issues. For instance, going in their personal items in the room, bluntly being in there when they shouldn't be there, just other things that were, to the point where you're causing these clients to have to go to the crisis center because they can't deal with the situation. You're causing others. What happens when this client is given a 30-day notice, but they're there for those 30 days? While those 30 days are in place, the other clients are suffering. What can you do about that?
I think, like I've mentioned before, getting the mental health provider, the mental health team involved is probably the first and foremost thing you need to do. I think another thing that we probably don't do enough of is getting to know each other. And what I mean by that is getting to know who you're bringing into your home, who that client is, the environment they're coming from, and have you done a good, thorough interview to get to know who that person is. And the other thing, I think, right now the department is really focused on making sure we have releases of information. I think it's important that you're making sure those releases of information are in place so that you can get all the information prior to bringing an individual in your home that may be already rocky. We all know our mental health clients. We've all had those scenarios. So we can't forget that at any given moment, those things do happen. Right? I mean, you can have a good couple weeks and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, it's not going good on that Monday when you come back to your facility. We've all been there, right? We still need to know the goods and bads of our clients and what to expect. If they're coming out of an inpatient unit and they're doing well, it would be good to know what does it look like when they're not doing well, so that you have a plan, even in a room and board, how to handle that, who to get a hold of, kind of like a small mini crisis plan.
Right.
I think that, to me, is the best pre-work you can do instead of waiting to be in that crisis and going, now what do I do?
Right.
I think that's the best answer I can give you, because without those things in place, you're going to have a crisis on your hand. You're still going to have the laws that tell you what you have to do in order to evict. And I think, like you said, you have this experience, you know what that looks like. I think the pre-work, the work ahead of time, is the most important for you as a facility.
And I agree with you. I think there is times where us as providers, we do go and we do get clients without the proper information. There have been times, though, where you do ask for them and they're not available at that time, and they'll say, well, we'll get that to you, Monday, or we'll get that to you on a certain date, and somewhere the ball gets dropped.
Persistency.
Yeah, and
You
you're
have to
absolutely
be
right.
persistent
And you're
with that.
absolutely right, and I agree with that. But even sometimes with that, even getting that information, even providing care for the individuals, you don't, even though you have this information, that client may come in and even if it's not so bad, even if they, they don't have major issues, you still provide care for this client. You get them in the home, and it's like totally different. Like it's, they exceed what has been given to you, and I understand that. Doing this for so long, you're not going to get anyone that's perfect. If they were perfect, even we're not perfect, but if they were perfect, they wouldn't be placed in the home to begin with. So therefore, you will have issues.
Good point.
So I understand that. I think more or less what I was saying was my concern with, because I can deal with the issue at hand and whatever time frame it takes. I have no problem with that. It was just the concern with other clients, because they do have mental issues, and when these things occur, it does affect them, and you can only do what you can for them and try to provide for them.
The
You know what I
department
mean?
sees that at all levels.
Yeah.
We see that everywhere we go, and I totally understand
Yeah,
that.
and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Absolutely. I've got time for one more question. We may be even pushing it. Go ahead.
Yes, this is pertaining to, you have the residents that are constantly moving from facility to facility, and
Okay.
they tend to know the law better than we do. And a lot of times, I find that when you're dealing with a disruptive resident, and it gets to the point where you have to call the authorities, and when the authorities come, their whole personality changes. They're calm and smooth and very respectable, very eloquent. My question is it within my rights to audio or video the action of them tearing up the house or having verbal abuse coming to the staff or to the other residents? Is it within my ability to audio or video their actions without their knowledge?
I'm going to be
and
the first
just
to
use-
say, this is not my expertise field. Okay? And I don't want to get going down a road that I am not a professional in and I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
But I think California does have specific laws to this. I do not believe you can record somebody without their prior knowledge. But again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not my thing, so I'm not going to advise you on that. I think my best statement is, if you do that, you need to be extremely careful, because that in itself, in the state of California, I think California is one of those that do protect people from being recorded in any form illegally. So let me just leave that there. That's not my field of expertise, but I have been down roads where that's come up, and I believe California has its own laws pertaining to that. But I will tell you this, that there are laws that tell evaluators in 5150 scenarios, it's AB 1194. I know this because I teach the class. They have to consider your information when you're describing situations that may make a person danger to self, danger to others, or gravely disabled due to a mental disorder. They have to. And if you're finding that that's not happening for you, reach out to Sandy, reach out to the patient rights office, reach out, because you're going to meet people from the crisis services, because this is the thing that the mental health department is teaching and making sure people are aware. We have to listen to people who are dealing with, who witness these things, and we have to, by law, consider the information you have pertaining to somebody who may be, again, dangerous to self, dangerous to others, or gravely disabled due to their mental disorder.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time. You bet.
Oh my goodness, I think we could have made that a whole week-long seminar and really dug in deeper. Again, questions, send them to me, send them to the numbers that are provided in your PowerPoint. Fill out your little half sheet that says, I want more information. We're giving you many, many, many options for asking those questions so that we can find the answers you need. Whew, that was kind of heavy. That was a lot of information to take in. Let's go ahead and take our 15-minute break. Hopefully, our other presenter will be here. Oh, I see he is. So let's do our quick 15-minute break, and then we'll come right back here and pick up with the next session. Thank you so much. Don't forget to update your vacancies, pick up your certificates for your attendance for the last session. They're all up here at the front. Thanks. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get moved on to our next topic. This one is another big heavy-duty one, and I'm sure it's a very passionate subject. Mark Roy is with GBLA, and he's going to be talking to you about landlord rights and responsibilities. Some of it may be kind of a bleed over from what you just heard. Some of it might clarify something you heard. Again, I want to encourage you, write down those questions. You will be given a time for question and answers at the end. And again, like you did last time, please find your way to the microphones. We're going to have to limit our question and answer time so that we can answer as many as possible. This is another one of those topics that could probably be a week-long seminar. So in the interest of being respectful to everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you Mark Roy from GBLA, and it's all in his hands now.
Well, good morning, and thank you in advance for putting up with me for the next roughly half hour. I am an attorney, and I'm the managing attorney for Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance's Fair Housing Law Project. And fair housing involves protecting people from discrimination based on the way they look or their personal characteristics. It oftentimes has a close interplay with the kind of work that y'all folks are doing in terms of providing housing oftentimes for people who have physical or mental disabilities, who are recovering substance abusers, and so forth, because there are many cases in which landlord-tenant law rubs up against fair housing or housing discrimination law. And with landlord-tenant law, there is a small window of potential liability for landlords. You can be required to pay attorney's fees for a small case of one kind or another. You can be stuck failing to win an eviction of a person and have to start it all over again. But when you open the door to fair housing or civil rights liability in federal or state court or in administrative complaints with federal or state fair housing entities, that's a whole different and highly escalated potential liability. I would much rather tell you ways to avoid having problems from a fair housing point of view than to actually initiate some kind of an enforcement action against your organization, your home, your group later on. So that's why I'm here. Now, I will start off by acknowledging that it's possible that there are some issues with advancing slides and things for the presentation, but I believe my colleague Imelda is handing out copies of the PowerPoint presentation that I prepared for today, which is oriented towards fair housing. However, during the question and answer time, I will do a couple of things, hopefully give you a practical answer to some questions that you would have. Before I hit 40, I didn't have anything better to do, so I went to law school. Before that, I was a human. And so I want to try and give you practical, useful information, but also information that's informed by the understanding I have of the law. I will tell you, just as I heard Mr. Kimmel mention earlier, I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. And I am prepared to give you legal information, but I don't know that I can give you legal advice, because in this context and this type of matter, it just would not be appropriate. If you hear something that you think that I've said that is very insightful, frightful, check with your own attorney to make sure, because I come at this from the tenant or the resident side, and I will try to be honest about my understanding of the law from your perspective as well, but I'm probably, when it's going to break one way or the other, I'm going to tell you to break in favor of my clients, okay? So first off, I mentioned that landlord-tenant law is a little different than fair housing. The federal law protects people from discrimination based on their race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or family status. State law goes on in addition to those things and adds several other categories, some that are kind of fuzzy and similar to the federal and some that are different. But they add medical or genetic condition, sexual orientation, marital status, source of income, arbitrary characteristics, which are, it comes from case law, means things like tattoos or body piercings. I can't refuse to rent to somebody because their tattoos or their hairstyle offends my sensibilities. And then finally, age, but it's a very limited thing, and it's that you can't discriminate against somebody because they're over 40 in housing. And typically, that occurs in employment, but not so much in the housing context. So if you're part of that group, and we're all part of that group, we all have a race, we all have a sex, we all have a national origin, we all have some kind of religion or non-religion. But what are the things that you can't do because of that? And I think on the slide that's numbered 6, I start to give you some ideas about prohibited conduct. You can't refuse to rent, lease, sell, or deal with somebody because of race, because of national origin, because of sexual orientation or gender identity or expression, those kinds of things. You also can't make discriminatory statements. This home is for Christians only. This home is we think that it's better to have this home only for African Americans, or only for Latinos, or only for Asians, or only for whites, because that's a statement that tends to unwelcome people based on their race. And the law says that you can't make a statement that indicates a preference, limitation, or discrimination because of any of those protected groups that I've mentioned. There are some limitations when it comes to sex in communal housing. So I imagine that some of you may have a home that is only for women or only for men. And I believe that that is going to be something that's not going to be considered a violation of fair housing laws as long as that's they're sharing common areas, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, other common living areas. And as long nowadays as you're not making decisions about whether somebody can stay there or not based on their biological sex at birth, but rather on their declared identity when they come to your facility. And this issue about transgender rights and is going to be one that will be visiting you all if it has not already. And so I warn you about it. It's an area where your landlord-tenant agreement could put you on the wrong side of a civil rights lawsuit if it's enforced or applied or understood in such a way that it denies people an opportunity to have housing based on their gender identity or expression. So in addition, discriminatory policies and terms, practices, and conditions. And then I'll flip over to the next page and talk about some other types of prohibited conduct. One is sexual harassment. We know what it is. Don't do it. Okay. I spend a lot of time as a fair housing attorney going after landlords who will say, I'll fix your stuff if you have sex with me. Or just every time they come over to collect rent, groping, fondling, making inappropriate comments so that it's just like every time I see my landlord, I just want to puke. Nobody should have to put up with that. There are other types. One, I will tell you that if you have sober living and other kinds of room and board homes, there may be protections from the government zoning you out of existence or preventing where you can locate some of your facilities. If you have issues about whether you should be allowed to have a residential home in this type of neighborhood or that type of neighborhood, and you feel as though you're getting blowback from the zoning department or anyone else, talk to my office about it. We can try and help figure out whether they're discriminating against you by denying opportunities for people with mental disabilities to live in the most integrated possible environment, rather than always to be stuck in homes that are located in places that are plagued with crime or don't have very good access to services, because that's not something that people with disabilities should have to put up with. Okay? But that's a conversation we can have at another time. But I do point out, you can be victims of housing discrimination, not just the people that you rent to. And finally, to provide false or misleading information to someone about the availability of housing is illegal. One of the things, and I believe HUD's new rule is coming out today or tomorrow. It's not a brand new rule. It's just a clarification of existing nationwide policy for the last 40 years. It has to do with discriminatory harassment, and I have to tell you about it because I get a lot of calls and I'm taking cases about this. If you are the manager, landlord of a facility, I expect, we're just going to start right offhand, that I don't think you're going around harassing people because of their sex, because of their race, because of their sexual orientation. I will give you the benefit of the doubt on that every day of the week. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but I certainly have no reason to believe that you're doing that. But if you also have control over other people that live in that home and they're doing it, under guidance that's issued from HUD that will actually be published in the Federal Register today, if you fail to protect a resident from discriminatory harassment by another resident, you can be held liable for the harm that's done to that person. So when people are going around making fun of somebody else because of their disability, or like I had a client that was neighbors in the apartment complex because she was deaf, would do this kind of stuff to torment her because they wanted her out or they wanted her dead. And she was just a deaf person trying to go through her daily life. And she complained to management and they gave her a 60-day notice, because she was causing trouble by complaining about her neighbors that were ridiculing her because she was deaf. And then they made up a story, and you guys have the TV too loud. Well, the husband and the wife were both completely, totally deaf and had children who could hear. They never got a notice for noise. How would they have known if their kids were playing the TV too loud? Because they're deaf. That kind of discriminatory harassment, and then doubling down by the housing provider to say, you know what, even if they would have said, you know what, we're going to evict that nasty neighbor and you, because we don't know who's right. We'll just get rid of you both. That's illegal too. You cannot take action, adverse, negative action, against the person who complained to you about discriminatory harassment. You have to investigate it, and you have to take appropriate action. If it turns out that that person, you honestly believe after talking to the residents that this really did not happen, then it may not be that there's an appropriate negative action that you're going to take against anyone else. You might want to be contacting people from the mental health if you think it's something that actually is maybe a symptom of their own mental illness. Talk to folks that may be able to help them deal with that. But if you decide that, you know what, I can't find evidence that this person is actually calling you the N-word every time that you go in front of them, or that they're making fun of you, or because of your sexual orientation, or telling you you're going to hell because the way you love people is different than the way I do, those kind of things, you need to take prompt and appropriate disciplinary action. And if that includes terminating someone's tenancy because of it, that's appropriate. But I also think anytime there's a complaint like that, just give a notice to everybody. Issue a notice to everybody in the home saying, this is a reminder that discriminatory and hateful comments based on race or national origin or gender or sexual orientation are unacceptable here. To at least serve as your way of showing, I took your complaint seriously, even though I couldn't find proof that was sufficient to kick somebody out of this housing. Okay? But I mention it just because it is this year's emerging topic because of the HUD discriminatory harassment and sexual harassment rule that I believe is scheduled to be published in the Federal Register today. There are, as you continue and look on slide numbers 9 and 13, you'll notice they are not all numbered. I toned it down a little bit so that, because I could talk about this stuff literally all week. I mean, you would turn into skeletons while I was still talking about fair housing issues. And I didn't want to put you through all of that. But I do want you to be mindful of the fact that you have to make sure that your practices do not target, discriminate, or limit opportunities for people because of the way they were born or their personal characteristics. Make decisions about their tenancy based on their conduct. What do they do? And their ability to pay. I mean, I'm sure you take people that have income and an ability to pay the rent. But make your judgments about them based on what they do, not on who they are. And you'll be fine. The other area that always comes into play and will come into play with some of the questions that I heard being asked today have to do with disability-related issues, accommodations. Many of the people that are living in your facilities are people with disabling conditions. Disability protections under federal and state law apply whether it's a mental disability or a physical disability. And they require you, number one, not to discriminate against them. Oh, no wheelchair users in this residence. And number two, also to be prepared to make reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications when it is necessary for a person with disabilities to have the full opportunity to use and enjoy their housing. Oh, and we actually got it working now. Great. So now I will tell you that it also includes residents and guests. I had a case when I worked up in Modesto. Somebody wanted to come and visit the tenant. The tenant did not have a disability, but the tenant's mother was in a wheelchair, and they wanted to be able to install a ramp at the house so mom could come and visit. The landlord said no, not appropriate. If the person is associating with a person with disabilities and needs some kind of an accommodation or modification, need to be open to those things. It's a person that has a disability, a person that is perceived to have a disability, even if they don't, and people that are associated with people with disabilities, whether it's a child or a guest or a visitor. And so what are those things, those reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications? The first one is, if you can back up one, back up another one. Let's see. No, keep there. Yeah, I don't know if the sex discrimination one, all right, yeah, we're on slide 18, 14.
Your numbers aren't the same as those on the screen.
That explains a lot.
Why I can't jump with your
I'm sorry. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. Reasonable modifications means a structural change to the building or the unit or the common areas around the unit. You don't have to pay for those, but you have to allow a resident to pay and make them if they're necessary for that person. So if there's somebody that says, I need grab bars to get in and out of the tub, and I'm willing to pay for those grab bars to be installed, or to have the Kern County or City of Bakersfield Access Grant Program pay for them, you can't say no. But you don't have to pay the bill, unless you are getting direct funding from HUD or federal government. Most of you don't. You're getting paid by the tenant. And so, but you have to allow reasonable modifications. But you don't have to pay for them. But you have to make reasonable accommodations. And I get this issue, for example, and I don't know if it visits any of you. A lot of people that you're serving are on SSI or SSDI. Their checks come on the 3rd of the month, or sometimes, some other day of the month. And if your rental agreement says rent is due on the 1st, and they always get their check on the 3rd, and you charge them a late fee every month, you can't do it. Because all you have to do is make an accommodation. Your rent's still due, but they can't be punished, given a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit, or ultimately evicted if the reason for them being late is because they don't get to tell the Social Security Administration when to send their check. And so you can adjust your rules to allow them to pay. And what I usually recommend is within 3 business days after their ordinary check is deposited. Now, if they're a person with a disability, that doesn't give them a license to pay their rent late anytime. Oh, the transmission on my car went, so I had to spend my money to fix the transmission. I don't have your rent. I'm disabled. You can't give me a notice. No. The reason that their rent payment was late then was because they made economic decisions that put housing secondary to their transportation. That's not your problem. But if the reason for the lateness is a foul up by Social Security that mailed the check the wrong day and they take a week to get it resolved, or if it's an automatic thing where every month they get their payment on the 3rd, you just need to adjust the way you do business so that they don't get punished for it. Okay, so that's an example of an accommodation. Another accommodation is allowing somebody to have an emotional support animal. And this, in congregant housing settings, is often a big deal. I have an emotional support tiger. Do I have to let you have it there? I would say you probably don't. California law doesn't allow people to have tigers as pets. But if they have a cat or a dog or some other legal animal that provides emotional support or actual services like a guide dog, then you have to allow the person to have that animal. You can't make them pay a pet deposit. You can't make them pay pet rent, and you can't limit the size or breed of the animal either. So if I say I have my emotional support pit bull, you have to let them have the emotional support pit bull, or take the risk that they will come to my office, and then I will send you a 17-page opinion of the U.S. Department of Justice and HUD saying that that is not a pet, it is a medical device, and you can't prevent them from having it unless that particular animal is a direct threat to people. Now, until recently, I had a pit bull. She was the sweetest animal around. If I looked at her wrong, she'd pee all over the floor. And she would never bite or do anything to anybody. But if the pit bull is aggressive or frightening or bites or that actual animal, then that creates a direct threat to your other residents, and you have a right to limit that animal. Okay, and say you can have an emotional support animal, it just can't be Bowser. okay? And so these are issues. Now, I will tell you, too, my contact information is here. Imelda passed out brochures and flyers. Numbers are on them. If you have a question, call me. I will answer your hypotheticals. I will not if you tell me, I've got Bob Smith living over here in my home, and he wants to do this, and I don't want to let him. What are my rights? I'm going to tell you, sorry, I can't help you on that one, because for all I know, tomorrow, Bob Smith might have an appointment with my office. And I have to choose to represent my clientele, which are the tenants or residents or people who believe they are a victim of discrimination. On the other hand, if you call me and say, I have this situation, and what would be, what would be my appropriate response dealing with this type of situation, I'll be happy to give you my opinion. You just remember, my opinion may not be the right one. I'm not God. I'm not the judge. I'm a lawyer that has an opinion. I'm not going to tell you stuff that I know is false just because my clients would love it. Oh, you can't charge them rent. They're my clients. No, I'm going to try and be honest with you, but I'm going to, again, break in their favor. Now, I don't know, just because of the time involved, that there's anything that I really want to say more about accommodations and modifications unless you ask, with one exception. And that is, every rule, policy, service, practice, procedure that you have is subject to a request for a reasonable accommodation. So if you have a contract that says, if you come here high, or if you violate some rule, you're subject to immediate termination, I can request an accommodation for that. And if it's reasonable, you may be required by law to grant that accommodation, even though it's very clearly set out in your rental agreement. Now, there are exceptions. I can't just say nothing counts, but I'll give you an example. And here is probably a more realistic example. You've got somebody in one of your facilities, they end up, they run out of their prescription for some medication, they can't get to the store in time to get a new prescription, and so they start to act in a bizarre and inappropriate manner that clearly violates the rental agreement. You give them a 3-day notice to quit, incurable. I send you a letter supported by a doctor that explains, here's what happened to Sally. And we've got it under control now, and we have measures in place that will prevent or minimize the possibility that this will ever happen again. So please make an exception to your policy and allow them to stay, subject to my monitoring to make sure that my patient does not go through anything like this in the future. I think if they can show that they've taken appropriate steps to prevent that bad thing from happening again, that you should grant that request. And if you say no, they could file a complaint. And then, of course, HUD or some judge is going to decide whether their request really was reasonable. Because if it was reasonable, and if they are a person with a disability, you have to grant it. So the only question is if it's unreasonable. If they say, yeah, this happens from time to time, and when I'm off my meds, I run around and hit people with a hatchet, and I can't assure you that it won't happen again, but please don't evict me, that's going to be a different story. So there is a judgment call here. But I would say the important thing is, if you ever get something from my office asking for an accommodation on behalf of a client, you'll find a paragraph in there that says, if you're not prepared to grant this request, the law requires you to enter into an interactive process with me to try to find a solution that will meet my client's disability-related needs and still allow you to function in doing what you need to do as the landlord and provider of this housing. And talk to me. Say, that doesn't work, but how about this? And we can then negotiate something that we believe will meet your needs as a landlord and our client, the disabled client's needs. Okay, now I think I'm close. I'm just going to ask if there are some questions. Number one, don't record audio, record video. Okay, California Penal Code says it's a crime to record a conversation without both parties' consent if there is a belief on the one party's side that it's a confidential communication. And it doesn't even matter if there's other people in the room. The safest thing to do is to say, if you want to have a nanny cam in non-private areas, you don't put these things in bathrooms, that's not legal either. But if you have some kind of a video camera in a common area that people are aware of and that only records video, you're probably okay. But not in their rooms, not in the bathrooms, and then not recording sound because of constitutional protections. You just don't want to do that, okay? And if you want to do anything else, talk to an attorney. But now, questions as much as you want until Sandra cuts me off because I'm getting late.
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes, all right. Shoot them out.
If you have any questions, please move to the microphones. Uh-oh, now you're in trouble. Come on, Ben.
Oh, and I will tell you, if I can answer the question that you had from before. Go ahead. All right. And the answer to that, and I agree with what Mark said, having a well-worded and clear rental agreement is very important that describes what your expectations are. However, unless you are a licensed facility offering a program and treatment, which the majority of folks here I understand are not, you have to follow all California landlord-tenant laws. You have to give a 3-day notice or a 30-day notice or a 60-day notice, depending on the length of time they've stayed and whether there's an allegation of a breach. If curable, the notice has to give them an opportunity to cure. And after all that's done, if they haven't cured and the notice expires, then you have to go to court and file an eviction lawsuit. And yes, during that time, it's going to create a great deal of difficulty if that person is causing disruption in the home. But I can't help that. I can just tell you that's what the law says. If they're not violating the law so that you can have law enforcement do something, if they're not a 5150 category that you can have them taken until they have some kind of mental health oversight, then you just have to follow landlord-tenant law, just like any other landlord evicting an individual out of an apartment, and have measures in place. I heard about a crisis plan working with Kern County Mental Health to make sure that other residents are shielded as much as possible from the damage that a toxic person can do in that housing setting. But now, if you had a different question, I'll answer that one too.
Thank you for that answer, but yes, I have a couple more questions. One of them, when you mentioned that the person that received SSI or other form of payment on a different date than the first, come and say, I did not receive my check, okay? We need to wait a week or 2 weeks. Is it legal for me to ask them to bring me a proof from the entity that provided him the check that he requested from them another replacement check or anything else, or I just have to wait for 10, 15 days and this delays my start of eviction time if they didn't mean to pay?
Mm-hmm. I think on that one, I'm with you. Okay, now here we're not talking about you get the letter from the Social Security Administration that says every year you get your check on the 3rd. Here you're talking about someone that says, my check was not delivered, or my check was misdelivered. Well, if that's true, they should be able to get some documentation. I've had one where the post office actually, the letter carrier actually gave me a letter to show to a housing provider that indicated, you know what, I actually believe that I did deliver that one to the wrong address. And those kind of, I would think it's perfectly appropriate for you to ask for some documentation of that. Because if you don't, you're going to start hearing it every month. Now, the other thing that I will tell you is that almost, and I don't think it's true to say everybody, but most people now are having electronic deposits. And so, you know, if there is something going on, many times I suppose the people that you work with also have rep payees. Talk to them to find out if that story actually holds water. But it is appropriate for you to ask documentation for that.
Thank you. The other question would be regarding the pets. Is it legal to ask the resident to provide pet insurance that covers the facility?
The answer to that is no. The HUD DOJ joint statement is more or less says the tenant should not be required to do anything extra because of the presence of an assistance animal in their housing. So that's why no extra deposit, no extra rent, and no extra insurance. Now, if you have a policy as a housing provider that says all residents must have renter's insurance, that's okay, because it's not being required of them because they have an assistance animal. They'd have had to get that insurance, which will have some kind of a, you know, probably a liability rider for an animal. They have to have it whether they're disabled or not. But that would be where I would say if it's an issue that you need to have insurance for everybody, have insurance for everybody.
Another question, if you don't mind. A resident come with a pit bull, and he said, this is an emotional pet for me. Can I request doctor recommendation or anything like that? Because if not, half of my tenants would be emotional, you know, about the pit bulls.
I have had people come into my office and say, I want a pet, so give me some note so that my landlord has to let me have one. It's pretty rare when a non-disabled person wants to try and play the disability game in order to get a pet around a no pet policy, but I can't rule out that that happens. What I can say is this: anytime someone has a disability that is not apparent or obvious, or they have a request that is not obviously connected to their disability, you have the right to ask for documentation from a provider. So in this particular case, I would say you can't go and start asking them, oh, are you bipolar? Are you schizophrenic? Do you have depression? No, you don't need to know what their disability is. What you have a right to ask for is some documentation from a qualified health provider, somebody that knows about this patient's condition and knows about their mental or physical health history, to ask for documentation from them that this animal is needed for this person to have the full opportunity to use and enjoy their housing. And if they provide that, then I think you have to let them. But you do have a right to ask for it. Now, on the other hand, if this is a blind person that came in with a guide dog, the need for the animal is apparent or obvious, and you're not even allowed to ask for something from the doctor. But when it's not obvious, then you can ask for that documentation.
Thank you much.
So along with the audio and, or you can't audio, right? Someone threatening you or a resident doing something to you. And when you say video, how can I say this? If someone is throwing things, just sporadically throwing things and having fits, walking around with scissors because they're not having their needs met, so they're duly diagnosed, what do you do in that respect as far as making sure that you have video showing that this person is having this type of behavior and you feel that you know physically threatened as an employee? What do you do in that state? Do you go ahead and video with your phone, or like you said, you have a camera in the kitchen area and you also have one in the living room area? But you know, if this person is coming into your room as a live-in employee, what do you do? How do you prevent that? Because it's their word against yours. If the police officer comes and they're very articulate, they know the law better than you do, and so it's like, what do you do? Wait until you get cut?
What is the answer to that? And unfortunately, we do live in, a society that says before a person in authority can take away the freedoms of someone else, they have to make sure that they have the amount of evidence needed to deprive them of their liberty. And so we hear it all the time. Oh, I'm getting threatened by my ex-boyfriend that he's going to kill me. And the person says, I want a restraining order. I want this guy prevented from harming me. And so often you hear, well, until he does something illegal, we can't do anything about it. Well, even then, the question is, well, if I do something illegal in the woods, does it make a sound, right? If I don't have documentation or proof, what can I do? And I think in those situations, the answer is, unfortunately, if you have to be very careful, document things. If this is a group home setting, are there other witnesses that heard what was being shouted, that are prepared to back you up? Have you given a notice? Have you contacted mental health? Have you called law enforcement? I mean, I don't think that they're coming over and they're sitting there thinking, oh, I wonder how much more of this I can make you put up with before I have to arrest someone. That's not their goal. But if they don't see enough evidence to justify them depriving someone of their liberty, they're not going to take them away. They're going to tell you, as I often hear, oh, that's a civil matter, give them a notice and evict them. And you can do that. But as you know, that does take time. And I just don't have a simple answer for that question. I want you all to be safe.
Okay, and the second part of that is, if you do videotape with your phone, and what are the charges against the facility or against the person as an individual, as a staff member? Is it going to be a personal charge against me if I have proof on a video or audio, or video, and then what charges can be brought against me as far as their
I
rights
can't
are
remember the
concerned?
actual section of the penal code, but I believe it's a misdemeanor to record without consent of a confidential communication. And again, there's all ways that sort of criminal charge can be defended. But there's also, I believe, in the evidence code, a prohibition from using illegally obtained evidence in any kind of a trial. So even if you recorded it all, if you can't use it as evidence in the trial because it was determined that it wasn't properly obtained, what good does it do? So what I would say is, you can, in a situation like this, don't use landlord-tenant law. Go and get a civil harassment restraining order against the person. That might even result in some kind of order that the person stay away from you. The court then has the ability to approve your right to video or audio tape, because then you've got the court's permission. The court does have the authority to do that. And that might be a way, if the officer that you call cannot protect you against that, get the restraining order, and on the paperwork that asks other orders, ask the police or ask the judge to give you an order permitting you to record this stuff. That's the best I can tell you, because I just don't practice that area too much.
Thank you very much. And just for the record, you have been so efficient and knowledgeable in your demonstration. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm...
If it's short?
Oh, I can condense it however you want. 1 minute, 30 seconds, I'm good at that. It sounds to me that for the landlords, for us to be safe dealing with the clients, is it within our rights to have policy and procedure when we bring those clients in to have them sign? If they agree to our policies and procedure, then it gives us the rights to take it to the next course of action if they disrupt or breach the policy of the agreement.
Here's what I think I know where you're going. When you put something in a contract, you cannot deprive the person of their rights under state law just by putting something in the rental agreement, okay? But you can have something. You can have, for an example, that if you're under the influence or have alcohol or drugs or are causing, these severe nuisances and problems with other clients, that you have them sign a contract that's saying they understand that some of those serious violations are grounds for an incurable notice to vacate, as opposed to a 3-day notice to perform covenant or quit. This is just a 3-day notice to quit. And that you ask them to agree that they understand that certain types of conduct justify, in this type of housing setting, an immediate 3-day notice to quit. Unfortunately, you can't say, and then I have the right to just put your stuff out. You still have to go through the eviction process. But that's where I think it's important to have the house rules specified, explained, understood, signed off on by the resident, where it says, we understand that this kind of a policy escalates that behavior from a curable notice, so that says don't do it again, to an incurable notice that says you knew it going in, that was a serious violation, you did it anyway, we're going to immediately go for eviction and you can't cure. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I understand.
I am done, except to say contact information for Greater Bakersfield Legal Assistance is on the last page of the handout that I gave you, both for GBLA. We do a lot of other things besides housing and busting your chops. We help people get guardianships for minor children that are at risk because their parents are incarcerated or have drug issues. We help seniors and veterans with various types of issues. We help people that are being terminated from public benefits or to try and deal with those problems. We help people get access to Medicare, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, whatever you want, all kinds of things like that. And we do a lot of work to try and protect people from domestic violence. So if you become aware that residents or anyone that you know has a civil law issue, not I got arrested for bank robbery and I need a lawyer, but call us. If we can help you, we will. If we can't, we'll refer you. But it's certainly worth giving us a call. I think that's it for me.
Wow, that was hard too. I hope you got some of your questions answered, and I hope if you still have questions, you use some of those ways that we have told you about to record that question. And all of those for Mr. Roy, I will funnel to him and give him the opportunity to answer, and then I'll either email them out to you or I'll bring them as handouts to our next session. A few things I wanted to cover. Inside, and thank you again, Mr. Roy. I appreciate your help. Inside your envelope, there's one envelope for each facility. And if you didn't get yours, you may have just missed it at the back door. So I'm just going to briefly, because in the interest of saving time, I'm not going to read all of this to you. I didn't do it as a PowerPoint because I knew you would have to do most of this reading on your own. This is in the section, I believe it's under tab 3. You'll have to look at mine got lost here. Your order document that I gave you at the last training. And this is under the section that is headed policy procedures or employee procedures. And I have gone through and found examples of some of those policies and procedures. And, for the most part, a lot of them are pretty much the same wording, but you're just going to put your company's name in there. But I want you to really look through, and I want you to think the process through. And for instance, the first one is employment eligibility. What does that look like for you? Do you have a job application that you're going to hand out? Put a copy of that, in your book. What do you do for background checks? How do you do that? There's many different ways. We're not doing it. We're not telling you must run them through LiveScan or you must do fingerprinting or you must. We're saying you need to have a policy, and we need to be able to look over that in your handbook and see that you've thought that process through. The pre-employment background checks is something that is usually, a lot of people are confused with it. They either write all this legalese or they just put in, will never have committed a crime. Well, some places say, if it was just a misdemeanor and it was over 5 years ago, I'll consider it. Put that in your policy. Make sure it's spelled out correctly. I put some examples in here of the drug-free policy because it really could be very, very simple. Like you see, there's an example 1 for drug-free policy. It's very simply written policy. But the example 2 is pretty long and lengthy. So we can have as much information in it as you think you need in order to operate yourself in a safe manner. Now, I know there's a big difference between having a big room and board of 50 rooms and having your personal home with 2 extra bedrooms, so you have 4 people. So there's a big difference between that. And I understand sometimes the only employees are you and your wife, or you and your son. It's much different than if you have a staff to take care of 50 individuals. So your policies and procedures may look very different. So just use these as guidance. Again, we are open for mentoring meetings. We will come and sit with you individually and help you develop the policy for your particular situation and your living environment. We can come to you, or we'll make an appointment for you to come to us. And again, if I have enough requests, we may just throw another workshop that's voluntary that you can come to, and we'll all work together as a group and get through this. We're new to this and we're learning, and you're new to this whole certification process and you're learning, but the beauty of it is we're learning together and we're able to learn from one another. So I always want to keep the doors open. Send me an email, make a phone call, fill out that form you have. Let us know what conversations we need to be having so we can make this work the most effectively for all of us, and the ultimate result will be better service to our clients. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and dismiss you. Do sign out as you leave. There's a sign out form so that you can get your certificate. You need to show that you were here for both sessions. Fill out the evaluation form. And remember, one section is for each presenter. So one will be for, one will be for Mark and Eric, and the other will be for Mark Roy. So fill those out and put them back there. We do look at those. We do take them seriously, and it helps us develop future trainings for you. Thank you so much and have a fabulous month. See you back here for our next training.